It sends a message that says content that is being sent to a third party.
Okay, great. Perfect. So yeah, I think we're live on Facebook. Um, okay, well, it's top of the hour, so George, do you want to go ahead and get started here?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. Well, thanks for being here. For those of you who are watching or on Zoom with us, George and I are starting to have these conversations on the first Tuesday of every month at 11 a.m. Eastern. And kind of the reason that we wanted to do this is, we just want to cover some topics related to the real estate industry, mortgage industry that are timely to discuss, and we'll always have a Q&A at the end as well. So each call will be about 20 minutes. With that in mind, I'd like to introduce you all to my preferred lender partner, George McCoots with Luminate Bank. And once again, thanks for being here, George.
Thank you, Margo. I'm excited about this. I enjoy talking about mortgages, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I do.
uh, real estate has always been a passion of mine, and helping other people achieve their goals with real estate is currently and I guess always has been a passion. So I'm excited about this new series that we're doing.
Absolutely. And just for those who are watching, you're a very humble guy, but can you, so that they understand the credibility of your history, how long have you been working in the mortgage industry?
I'm going to really date myself here, but I wrote my first loan in 1987, and
Wow.
um, I've done several different things, everything from condo conversions to large scale construction projects on a national basis to just doing your local home loan in your hometown. So I've seen a lot of different sides of the business.
Yeah. Well, I can tell the audience that George and I met probably 6 years ago now. George was the savior on a deal that I was doing in South Carolina. And after that, I knew that I had found a lender who was incredibly reputable and we reconnected. We didn't reconnect soon enough. However, I am very happy to be back in business with George. And for those of you who don't know myself, I'm Margot Weatherford, and I have been in the real estate industry for almost 15 years. So the majority of my professional career, I've been on the corporate side of real estate, the recruiting and training side of real estate, and I got back into sales. Gosh, full time when COVID hit. So that was fun. But it actually turned out to be a blessing in disguise. And I love what I do. Had the pleasure of, through my teams, et cetera, selling over 600 homes in my career. And I just love helping buyers and sellers get to the closing table and negotiating the best deal for them. So I think that what all of you will find is that you've got two industry professionals here who are seasoned. George definitely more than myself. However, we are also, I can speak for George on this, excited, to talk about these topics and just to share this educational content with all of you. Um, so with that in mind, I want to move into our first conversation here for today. And George, I'm going to ask you, from your side of the lending world right now, what's something that buyers or agents are not talking about enough?
I think everybody is so fixated on their electronics, their streaming and all that, that everybody's just reciting talking points right now about where rates are, where the economy is, where the housing market is. Bless you. When in fact,
Thank you.
there's uh, it's not really accurate, and a lot of the information that's being pushed out is backward looking. We're talking about stats from that cover the last quarter of last year.
Mm.
So right now, I think is as buyers, particularly, we're about to hit that inflection point where pricing, as interest rates start to come down, pricing is going to start to go up. And if you just use the local area like we had talked about, there was 3.8% appreciation in the Jasper Big Canoe area last year. And that was in a market that faced an average interest rate of like 7.25%. So right now, I think we're in a decidedly downward trend. And with all the changes that are happening in the monetary policies and that with the current administration, the focus is to get that interest rate back down. And when they say down, it's probably going to be like in a mid 5% range. So focusing on not necessarily focusing on the payment, but focusing on finding the right house in the right neighborhood at the right price, and seizing on that, even if it's costing you a little bit more monthly right now, is I think where the conversation should be heading.
Gotcha. So, as far as, I mean, obviously in the news, we're seeing all this conversation nationally about tariffs and, some administrative decisions that are happening rather quickly. I know that on the real estate sales side of things, we do have clients that are paying attention to that and might be a little bit concerned about the timing of going ahead and purchasing a property now versus waiting 6 months to see what happens from the national economic arena. What are your thoughts on that, George? Do you think that it's worth waiting? Do you think that folks have the right idea about that based on what you're seeing?
Well, I think this is a conversation that I've had like really, really frequently, especially in the last 6 to 8 months now. Uh, the Well, tariffs, to kind of knock that off our list first, tariffs are like a value-added tax for products coming from countries or areas outside of our borders. They've always been there. They do raise, or they could raise pricing, but that pricing is a one-time, or that raise is a one-time hit, and then that's just the price going forward. It doesn't continue inflating each month or getting bigger. Also, with the current economic policy, we're not borrowing as much money. And borrowing is what makes interest rates higher because there's more supply of bonds in the market or debt instruments. Presumably, they're not as good a quality and they're harder to get a higher price for. So by cutting that down, by decreasing the amount of supply in the market and decreasing the amount of money that's in the market, it's going to bring interest rates down. So the cost of waiting is a very real thing. And there's a backdrop that not a lot of people are thinking about. We're still about 4 million housing units short in the United States. Most of that shortage is centered on the East and West coasts.
Mm,
So that's where people want to be. That's where commerce is. That's where industry is, technology and so forth. So, um, you know, jumping in right now, obviously needs to be the right place, and it needs to be priced correctly. The chances of you losing on that, or turning around and seeing a 10% cut in the value of the home in the next year is much less likely, due to one, shortage, and two, the fact that money is going to get cheaper, prices are going to go up.
yeah, that makes sense. It's there's definitely different opinions around that topic. However, you and I are on the front lines, having conversations with folks around the country that are in our industries, and I agree. I align with what you're saying very much. Before we go into the real estate market update, is there anything else you want to add on that topic, George? Just, anything that you would like to say to our audience as far as something that, you know, buyers or agents are not talking about enough right now, misconceptions that are going around. Anything else to add to that?
There's been a few changes, as you and I just experienced. Condos in general are a difficult topic right now. And it all kind of goes back to that terrible disaster in Florida, that we saw a couple of years ago.
Hmm.
And since then, purchasing of condos has become really, really difficult and really complicated. Even though there's still a great second home, because I know a lot of people, might live in your area, but might also live or have a home in Atlanta or one of the major cities. Uh,
Right.
Condos are usually,
Florida being another market that a lot of folks in Big Canoe either have homes in Florida or they have family in Florida, family friends. Yeah.
so the condos are still a great option. But being selective with which condo is a big deal, and whether or not they can get approved. So I guess that's that, and the fact that we can't underestimate the power of the market. Real estate has held up incredibly well with 4% a year appreciation. And in communities like Big Canoe, which is a very nice exclusive community, there's always going to be a demand for that community. So
Hmm.
um, I don't think you're going to find yourself in a situation where you've made a bad investment there.
Right. Yeah, I going on to the real estate update side of things, you George, you and I were talking the other day, and I shared that some of what we're seeing here in Big Canoe and what I'm observing is, well, first of all, if you look at the data, um, home prices have appreciated in Big Canoe specifically by 8% year over year from February of 24 to February of 25. That is much above the national average that you shared at a 3% appreciation. Um, so I definitely, in our market specifically, we are seeing, that homes are gaining equity, despite possibly having longer days on market to sell, despite having more competition and a little bit higher months of inventory. But the months of inventory in Big Canoe right now is at about 4.7, which is still a seller's market. But if you look at the trend line over the past 3 years, 3 years ago, 4 years ago was the height of folks moving to exclusive places because they could work virtually. And Big Canoe saw an incredible increase in home values during that time because a lot of folks from Atlanta came up from the city and either bought a second home or relocated, to the mountains. Um, but that being said, even though in early 22, maybe the month supply of inventory was one, which is okay, you've got multiple offers, you're having to go somewhat over asking to secure the property. You might be not even stepping inside of the house before you make an offer on it. However, now, it's just creeped up a little bit to 4.7, but I still find that encouraging because we're still in a seller's market. Home values are still increasing steadily year over year. And that to me shows that there still is a demand for the product in our community. So I feel good about that as a realtor, when I'm sharing with my seller clients, well, is now a good time to sell or should I wait? Um, for sellers too, the cost of waiting for buyers is real, but also for sellers, depending on what they want to do as a result of the sale, are you selling and buying another house? Because if you're going to be buying another house, now's a better market to buy the other house than if you were, to wait until the height of summer or the early fall. But anyways, it's just interesting to see how, our two industries are kind of working together to tell a story. And I think that that story is still a positive one for homeowners. What do you think about that?
I agree, Margaret. It really is probably one of the best times to buy real estate. Uh, uh, the inventory is coming up, so there is other additional opportunities, a lot more opportunities than there were before, especially with only 30 days of inventory on the market a year or two ago.
Right.
And again, the cost of owning that real estate, especially long-term, is getting nothing but cheaper. So, yeah, very advantageous time to make a move, even if it was for a second home, or like we talked about, to do a condo or a second home or something of that nature. Or invest.
Definitely. Sure. Well, is there anything that you'd like to add before we open it up for Q&A to those that are on the Zoom call with us? And also on Facebook, if you're watching on Facebook, I'll monitor those comments on the live stream.
Not really. I'd love to see what's on everybody else's mind, see what they're feeling or seeing in the market.
Yeah, well, if you're on the Zoom call with us, if you want to either take yourself off of mute, or you can pop into the chat box with a question that you may have for George or myself, and we'll give you guys a moment.
Something else too is, as we talked about, is there's a couple of different analysis that can be done, very simply, don't require a lot of personal input to analyze, is it a good time to sell? Is it a good time to buy? Or even a specific house, which is this house really a good value for me, and what's it going to look like in the future?
Right. Yeah, I've on that same thread, I've been very pleased. I think for the most part, my average over the past 4 or 5 months for my buyer clients has been, I shared this with you, George, to get them 93% on average of list price. So, on a $550,000 house, that's $30,000 savings um, for them, and that's significant.
Oh,
On
yeah.
a monthly mortgage payment, what would that equate to? Maybe on average $300 a month, or
Yeah,
somewhere in that ballpark.
yeah, at least a couple of $100 a month on a $500,000 purchase, depending on down payment. So yeah, 30,000 over 30 years is real money.
Yeah. We do have a question here in the chat from M. Schwartz. And the question is, are you finding that sellers are still listing their homes with aspirational pricing? Well, I'll go first on this, and then George, if you have any comments, because you see home prices and offer prices too. Um, so my response to that is yes, they are still listing with aspirational prices. The challenge of this, if I'm looking specifically at the market that I work in, which is now just Big Canoe, Georgia, um, it also depends on the neighborhood. In Big Canoe, we have over 3,000 homes, and we have different subsections, different, neighborhoods within our community. So some of those communities, you may not have a home that sold in the past 2 years. However, you might have a home that sold 3 years ago. And so then sellers now in our current market are saying, well, Bob and Sally Smith just got a couple of years ago, they got 850,000 for their house. And, I should be able to list for at least that much. Um, Again, based on, how the properties compare to one another. But the purpose of that example is really just to drive the point that yes, there are sellers who are still thinking that their home is worth X when it's really worth Y. And appraisals are even coming in higher than what actual market values are. So you'll see sellers, who sometimes market in their listing, appraised value is X. And sometimes that appraised value is the market value, but you have to be careful. And that's why you need a seasoned realtor to help you analyze the comps and understand, okay, even though it appraised for 675, is it really worth 675 right now in this market? So that's my take on it. George, do you have any comments?
Um, th- eh, yeah, I definitely want to echo your comment of, you really need to be working with a professional, with a buyer's agent that understands the market that you're in. The place I'm seeing the biggest concessions, and that's where they do come up, is when I get that appraisal and it was 675 on the purchase agreement, and it comes in at 625 on the appraisal.
Oof.
Now, that hasn't been a thing in your area really at all.
Yeah.
It's very, very stable. But there are Arizona, Nevada, areas of Texas, particularly some areas on the west coast of Florida have all seen where, yeah, we bought the house for 500 2 years ago. Why isn't it worth 650 now? And
Yeah.
that's really not necessarily the way it works. So having the right realtor, setting the right expectations, and the houses that have aspirational pricing, they're going to sit for quite a while. And it's amazing how much more realistic the prices get after they've sat for 3 months.
Well, and the scary part of that too, and what I explained to my sellers is there's a very fine line. There's actually a diagram of a pyramid when it comes to listing your property, and there's the top 10%, or however the pyramid is laid out. But the bottom line is there's a 10% plus or minus really to the true market value of a home that you should list the home within. And if you want to be competitive, you should probably go even just a tad below true market value to drive, more traffic to your property. But if you if you overprice too much and you sit for several months and try to wait it out for the right buyer, you can end up selling for less than what you actually could have sold for if you had priced a little more appropriately to begin with. So it's tough because again, it's not, we're in a little bit of a weird market right now in a sense that I have clients who, we've listed their home at a price that we say, hey, we looked at the comps, this is it. This is where we need to be. And we're 100% sure of it. And the home doesn't move as quickly as we thought it would. And of course, that comes down to George, as you and I spoke about before this call, making sure if you are going to list your home that you've taken care of those deferred maintenance items.
Absolutely.
Um, even potentially having a home inspection done prior to listing. I remember sitting in on a training in 2015 with a very seasoned realtor who had been through the 2008, 2009 crisis. And she said, before I list a home, I require my clients to have a pre-inspection done. I think she even actually she required an appraisal to be done and she just credited it back to them when the house sold. But finding out what's wrong with your home up front so you're not blindsided when a buyer has their own home inspection. And then taking care of some of those items. If you spend $10,000 before you list your home to paint, fix cracks, resurface a floor, landscape, whatever it might be, you can get it back. And of course, talk to a seasoned realtor to help you decide what's worth doing. But there is some value in addressing deferred maintenance with your home before you put it on the market.
That's an excellent point, Margot. And that stuff comes through on an appraisal. I might see a 2,500 square foot house that has all the maintenance has been addressed. It's beautiful. The yards look great. Uh, and in the same neighborhood with a house with 500 square feet additional or in the same area, there the the price per square foot is really reflective of the fact that maintenance has been deferred. And there is a grading system inside of appraisals that even if the appraiser doesn't account for it, the underwriter might, depending on what grade
Right.
it comes in.
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. To M Schwartz is what I'm seeing on my screen. So thank you for your question. Also, another question here is from M Schwartz. If a home has an unfinished basement, how does that factor into pricing your home? How does that impact your price per square foot? So obviously in our community of Big Canoe, and we have a lot of terrace levels is what we call them, George, on, basements. And I'm not sure, I'm assuming that this person lives in Big Canoe. But anyways, the so if it's unfinished, if you have an unfinished basement, whether it's in Big Canoe or somewhere else in the country, an appraiser is not going to give that unfinished square footage the same value as the finished. So, as far as how does it factor into pricing your home, you would definitely want to speak with a real estate professional, have them come out, take a look at the home overall, and help you understand how that factors in. Because every home is different. There's not going to be, it's not a 2 + 2 = 4. It's definitely going to be subject to the rest of the house, the neighborhood, you know, who the neighbors' homes beside you. But it does have an impact. You can't put the same price per square foot on an unfinished basement as you can on the part of your home that is finished.
With appraisals, you'll notice that appraisers, if it's truly like a basement, like you've got the washing machine down there and maybe your furnace, those are not considered living space. So they might get that square footage might be worth only about 20% of what the finished square footage is. So you've got a $200 a square foot house, your basement's worth about 35 or $40 a square foot.
Yeah. Yeah. Great question.
Yeah, it's an excellent question, actually.
Not seeing anything else right now. Does anyone else on the call have any questions before we wrap up? Okay. Well, I think that's it, George.
Thank you,
Thank you
Margaret.
for your time today.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, it
I'd
was
like to
fun.
thank everybody for showing up with our first inaugural call here. And I'm looking forward to doing this again with y'all next month.
Yep. So first Tuesday, 11 a.m.
Yeah.
We will send out, um, I know that I send it to my group, and George, you'll send it to yours as well, the topic for next month. And if you have any ideas, for those of you who are tuning in, if you have a specific topic that you